It's Make the World a Better Place, Design with Passion, Purpose, and Values. The book started as a project after retirement, and it was something that was in the back of my mind for a long time. And actually, I kind of tried to push it out of my mind to do something more fun during my retirement, but it kind of kept coming back to me, and it was in the voice of my father, who, when I was a young man, said to me, whatever it is that you do with your life, make sure you leave the world a better place than you found it. So with that in mind, I kind of charged into this project, really not knowing what I was getting myself into, actually. I had this kind of partial idea, but as you can imagine, making the world a better place is a pretty complex topic, and where I thought it might take me 9 months, it took 3 years. So I was quite pleased, as was my wife, to have this come out earlier this year. And I'm really pleased with the reception that it's had, particularly in Europe. I'm not quite sure why that is, but the book sales are particularly high in Europe. I have my hypothesis, but I'd be interested in kind of hearing what other people might think. That perhaps there's an interaction between this idea, making the world a better place, and different kind of mindsets in the US and Europe around the role of design in the economy. So what is the purpose of design? And that, of course, is part of the subtitle, Design with Passion, Purpose, and Values. And all three of those may be part of the issue, passion, purpose, and values. That was really the key complexity in addressing this topic. I mean, the key question that kept nagging at me is what is a good design? And I think when we think about good designs, we think about the Apple Macintosh or a Ferrari sports car or a Gucci dress or something like that. And we think of characteristics of the product or the service, the functionality, the look and feel, the aesthetics, and what I was confronted with is if a design is going to make the world a better place, we need to be thinking more deeply about what good is when we think about good design. So it really took me back to a very fundamental philosophical question of what is good. So that's actually where I started, is thinking about values. When we think about design and designs that try and make the world a better place, and good design, we need to think about what are the basic values that we're working with. So I found myself digging quite deeply into the philosophical literature, going back to Aristotle, but primarily focused on the Enlightenment, and particularly the Scottish Enlightenment, of looking at what can make the world a better place. And that's really where I started with this book, is thinking about principles of design based on values. So I came up with a set of values based on my reading of the Enlightenment. And the first value was, or is, do no harm. That's the first principle in my set of 7 principles. And the second one is quite related to it. It is reduce harm when we see it. So those are the top values that are embedded in the principles that I propose on making design a better design for a better world.
That's great. Thank you, Robert. So I know the book also has quite a lot of examples of good and bad design, right?
Yes.
Perhaps any of the bad examples you could share that's always a little bit entertaining for an early morning session? Anything you want to highlight?
Well, the book kicks off actually with a bad design, which is the Boeing 737 MAX 8, which is a jetliner. And you may be familiar with it because a few years ago, the first couple of them that went out into service actually crashed, killing hundreds of people. And I dug into that case and found out that actually there were things that people did, decisions that were made early on in the design of the aircraft that resulted in the crash. And it's really quite documented, which in some ways is quite surprising. The decisions that were made, that engineering and design decisions, where the test pilots in the Boeing who were trying out this aircraft initially in its simulation, but subsequently in actual service, found that there were significant problems. And rather than addressing the problems in the flight of the plane, they actually kind of just tweaked some software, which they thought would address the problems, but actually made the problems worse, in this sense that the software that they used was intended to initially to take over the plane when there were significant emergencies, that, for example, the plane was going into a stall, a nosedive, and then this software would take over and correct the flight. Well, they tweaked this software to take over whenever there were other problems, unbeknownst to the pilot, incidentally. So there were several incidents, these 2 incidents, one in Indonesia and one in Ethiopia, where the software took over incorrectly, and the pilot could not adjust for it, in part because the pilot didn't even know that the software had taken over. So the plane was going like this as the pilot was fighting the software, and ultimately the plane took a nosedive going at 500 miles an hour and killing everyone aboard. So this was an example of harm done by decisions that were made by the company, and was one of the reasons that I specified harm or do no harm as a primary principle in the book. There are many, many other cases, of course, where designs have resulted in harm of various sorts, addictive drugs, cigarettes, much of the harm that's done is by companies that externalize the negative impacts of their products or their production to pollute the environment or emit greenhouse gases and so forth. So there are several case studies and plenty of examples of negative impact of design on the environment and on people.
So one of the topics that you mentioned there in that example of bad design, and I think that's also fleshed out more in the book, is your thinking on how technology shapes design. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, and this builds off of a contemporary philosopher, a Dutch philosopher, Peter Paul Verbeek, who you may be familiar with. He's the rector at the University of Amsterdam, and he's quite famous for his quote that design is doing ethics by other means. The principle being that what we design into our technology has a fundamental shaping of the behaviors that people engage in as they use it. And that in many ways, designers, because of that, have more moral impact on people and their behaviors than perhaps ministers and priests and philosophers, so that there's a significant both moral impact and moral responsibility that designers have in considering the good that can be and the bad that can be engaged in as a result of specific features in design. And we really need to be thinking about this seriously when we design products, say using chatbots and other applications of artificial intelligence, which have the potential of being used to do great harm. And that concerns me significantly. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, of course, about the AI apocalypse, that AI will take over and will destroy the human race. I'm afraid that before AI has a chance to take over, that humans will use AI to create much harm, and AI doesn't need to bother taking over. We'll just kind of do each other in. The capabilities of AI are just astounding, and the harm that can be done is really significant. And I'm particularly concerned about harm and design, in part because this isn't really an issue that designers consider. That we do externalize this question of design and harm. That we look only at the good things that can come from it, and we don't consider the harm. And I'll give you an example. You may be familiar with Tim Brown, who is a designer here in Silicon Valley, and quite a famous designer. And during a design conference, he was asked about the ethical mandate for designers, what the ethical mandate would be. And he said, and this really surprised and rather shocked me. He said, well, whatever it is, it wouldn't be do no harm. Because if we followed that oath, if we took that oath, we'd never do, quite likely, we'd never do anything new. And I was just shocked at this because what it did, first of all, was oppose doing something new and doing harm. That these were somehow antithetical. That if we wanted to do something new, we had to forget about an oath to do no harm. And if we wanted to take an oath to do no harm, we would not do anything new. Which just baffled me, because it seems to me that one of the greatest contributions design can make is coming up with new ways to do no harm or to address harm that exists. I don't see these as antithetical. And the other thing, of course, that he claimed in that statement is that with these two oppositional considerations in his mind, that clearly doing something new was more important than doing no harm. So with that mindset, inevitably we're going to be doing harm, and that you know, I'm just flabbergasted at that statement. But I think it's reflective of the kind of super capitalism that exists here in the U.S. And in my thinking, my sense is, and I would be interested in hearing from those of you in Europe, that there are significant differences between the U.S. and Europe in this regard, and that it may be one reason why the book is more popular in Europe. So I'd like to kind of open it up at this point for comments. And
thank you, Robert. Exactly. Let's do that. Let's take, anybody has questions, you can use the feature in Microsoft Teams. You can also just write in the chat. Just to summarize, the book came out in April. It's almost 400 pages. You had a copy of it right in front of you, right, Robert? You can see the cover there with the planet being held up by different hands. And there's also a wonderful quote by Don Norman on the cover.
Yeah, I was pleased.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, an essential book for everyone, citizens, designers, and most importantly, decision makers in business and government. So I was really pleased that Don endorsed the book.
Oh, that's great. And
I think the book, Don has a book coming out, or has come out about the same time on the same subject, humanity-centered design.
Very good. So, like I said, if anybody has any questions, briefly, the book also has 5 different design traditions where you kind of take, I think, through the history.
Yeah.
Let's hear it from Shannon.
Yeah, I figured I would just give my input on that question of the popularity in Europe. I'm American, living in Denmark, and there's been a very big push or emphasis on sustainability over here, and companies focusing on ESG and trying to be corporate sustainable, and that's been a theme at many conferences I've attended in the last couple of years. So it doesn't surprise me that this book would be well received over here. It seems that Europe is often ahead of the game in those kinds of trends, and then the US sort of follows a little bit after. But I don't know what the feeling of it is in the US in terms of how much companies are also focused on sustainability over there, if that's also becoming sort of trendy. like it is over here, but it certainly is a popular topic in the Scandinavia, certainly.
Thank you,
Well,
Shannon.
thank you, Shannon. Just to comment on that, it's a very different situation here in the U.S. and there are companies who have identified sustainability and other kind of values beyond pure profit as important. On the other hand, there's been a significant blowback in what's described as the war on woke. That companies need to be focused strictly on profit and to forget about all of these other values such as sustainability and equity, and that these are kind of a political agenda which shouldn't be incorporated into economic considerations or anything else for that matter. It also gets played out in public schools and it's quite a mess here in the U.S., I'm afraid to say, and I'm really quite concerned.
Let's move to the train. I think, Antonia, you wanted to jump in from, I think, going on the train from Germany to Denmark?
Actually, Denmark to Germany this time. I've been in Denmark for a week now. Hi, I'm Antonia. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I'm a digital designer for sustainability, and I've studied sustainable design in Denmark. And I'm now teaching sustainable design in Denmark at a university. And thank you for your book. And I also wanted to chat in, like Shannon, through the situation in Germany and Denmark. I'm actually going to read your book and then see if I can put it on the reading list for my students for next year, because we're teaching sustainable design for industrial design students, textile design, fashion, and communication design. And the situation is, well, I work freelance as well. So I also see the situation of many different clients, and sustainability has to become a business case. I'm actually working quite hard with some colleagues to writing some stuff about how sustainability in digital world can be a good business case, more for long-term development than short-term growth. And I think a big part of that is also that we have to think about more about degrowth. And I can say with absolute delight that I know a lot of young people and students specifically who are focusing on these topics. And although I experience setbacks in my business every single day, I absolutely believe, and Torsten has said that to me as well from the Sustainable UX Network, when I came to him with a bit of a breakdown that sustainability is like really struggling. He's like, time is on our side. And I do believe that this is the case. But I also do think that Europe is a bit ahead, but we do have our challenges here as well. But just the perspective of a bit of a younger crowd, they're really working hard. And I hope that I can get your book to our students as well.
Thank you very much. I should say that there actually are several other principles in addition to the two that I mentioned of do no harm and reduce harm when you encounter it, that I propose to guide design, and specifically good design for a better world. And they are these. To increase happiness and well-being, to advance agency and knowledge, to promote equity and equality, to address injustice, and to build compassionate communities and relationships. So what I propose in the book is that those principles, those values, are ones that can be used to create good design, designs that make the world a better place. So I think building a business case is certainly important, but I think we can't escape the need for these underlying values that we individually and collectively as corporations or governments need to have a common value base that we use to make decisions. And that I propose that these are really fundamental values that go back to the origin of our species. These are things that we've always been concerned with. Knowledge, happiness, reducing harm, building communities and relationships. That's a fundamental part of who we are. And we need to focus on those important common values if we're going to make the world better.
Great, thank you. I think this a little bit answered the question that you had, Anya, asking specifically on what your advice is to designers to change the situation. So look at the need for underlying values. Anya, did you want to just briefly elaborate?
No, I just think it's very interesting to look at the difference between the cultures here as well. And I was just thinking from your perspective, what advice would you actually give us if we are in a global company? Because if we in Europe put a lot of focus on sustainability, etc., then of course our products will be more expensive, or there's a chance at least that our products will be more expensive, and we still want to be able to compete. So how do you think that we should approach that when the situation is different, for instance, in US, for instance, in China, Japan, and etc.? What is your advice there? Do you have an advice for that?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, that looking at what it is that people need, and that these values will get played out in those needs, that these are fundamental needs that people have to reduce harm, to increase their happiness, to advance their knowledge and their agency, to build relationships. So the focus for design, and I think this also has the strongest business case, is what it is that people need, and that we should be designing for those needs. Unfortunately, I think we too often in this competitive world design primarily or even exclusively for profit. So it's easiest to say make a profit if we can find something that's addictive, whether it's a chemical, a drug, a piece of software, a cigarette. It's the business case is strongest for developing products that are addictive, that people need, not that makes their world better, but that they have to have. And so this has to be these values for what people really benefit from. I think are the basis for competitive products.
Thank you so much, Robert. We just made it. Thank you once again for getting up early on the West Coast, for joining us and telling us more about the book. My page here is full of notes. That was really good conversation. Thank you so much, Antonia, Shannon,
thank you for the opportunity.
Everybody else who chipped in. We made it work. Take good care. Happy holidays, and we'll be in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you once again,
Thanks,
Robert.
everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.